Hunter or Libram Paladin, sorry, kind of shines. And because No Hands has brought a lot of weapon classes in general with Demon Hunter, with Weapon Rogue, and with a Warrior, he's also teched some of his decks to beat those with the Priest having both Acidic Swamp Ooze and the Cobalt Sticky Finger. So I do think Eddie has an edge, but No Hands lineup is pretty well-rounded overall. It's got some of those decks that are just high in power level, meaning they can take wins against anything. They don't have a lot of absolutely terrible matchups outside of maybe the Demon Hunter versus Paladin. So we'll see, but this one should be interesting. I'm excited to see if No Hands can overcome the odds and solidify his position in first place.
Yeah, so we're gonna start things off with that Priest and see if it can get that win, because as we have indicated, and we've seen this a little bit over the past in different streams, or if you just kind of watch little content, that Demon Hunter wants to avoid that Paladin if possible. And so No Hands getting the win here would be huge to help get that Demon Hunter through. But, Priest versus the Demon Hunter, I mean, sometimes Demon Hunter can just roll over the Priest if they're just not prepared for early game. And he does have these 2 Draconic Studies to try and see if he can get onto the board early, finds a Brightwing if he wants to play for that early tempo, although turn 3 is already somewhat occupied through things like the Volpara's Scoundrel. So I think right now it feels like a really good curve to Brightwing on 2 and then Volpara's Scoundrel on 3, instead of waiting for these late-end dragons that probably won't have a significant impact. If you're playing things like Ysera, Demon Hunter's just going to ignore that Ysera and just kill it.
Yeah. It's tough. You kind of have to play for tempo early, knowing full well that the Demon Hunter will likely be able to remove it with Blade Dance and with the Shard Shatter Mystic, but you have to force him to have it, because every minion that survives on the board is a threat to the Demon Hunter. They can't ignore it, because that could turn into an Apotheosis target later on in the game, and or just, random buffs here and there that, Priest is good at finding with the like Volpara's Scoundrel, or Ascetic Galeweaver. You have to respect the minions, and so the tempo is usually the best game plan for the Priest, and then hope that you find that healing later on to be able to withstand the damage. And Eddie's lineup, or his deck list, is, like I mentioned, pretty good at doing that with the Acidic Swamp as a Cobalt Sticky Finger, even though those aren't as good against Demon Hunter as they are against, say, Bomb Warrior. It's still, effective healing in the long term.
All right, well, we'll see if the effective healing ends up becoming a big factor here as NoHandsGamer. It looks like he's picking up a really awkward, heavy hand.
Wait a second. You got the Frizz.
Oh, yeah, the Frizz.
From the Brightwing. That's actually, well, I mean, it's not the best, right? But if he's able to play it safely, which it looks like he will be going into turn 4, that's a reduction in cost on Murozond. That's a reduction in cost on the Cobalt Spellkins. Which could be pretty big as we move forward, especially in combined with Draconid Studies. He might be able to, get those cards out for quite cheap, which could give him much needed tempo. Pretty interesting.
I mean, that's some kind of synergy that we don't really think about. Frizz was a legendary minion whose battlecry reduces the cost of dragons in your deck. It was a card that was mainly played in Druid when it was first released. And people were thinking you could play Dragon Druid and discount all your dragons and just tempo out for the rest of the game. And, ever since that small little pocket of the metagame, we haven't really seen Fizz Gindoros really make it out much. So, fun little throwback, but also still sometimes when you randomly generate it and you have dragons in your deck, it ends up becoming kind of relevant here. No dragons in the hand for Eddie. Theoretically, Cobalt Spellkin and Murozond could be the last 3 cards in this deck. But, maybe even just having that 5/4 tempo is nice, because, Twin Slice still costs 1, so we have no opportunity for a Gladebound Adept here in order to gain that tempo on No Hand's side.
Yeah, and if he coins out a Soul Shard Lapidary here to deal with this Frizz, it means that he's going to be delaying the double Gladebound Adept hand even further, and delaying the Skull. He's also got the Skull in pretty much the worst position possible. A lot of expensive cards to the left, and some expensive cards to the right. And Philosophy picked up from the Wandmaker, which is one of the worst, if not the worst, Wandmaker pull for Demon Hunters, just because there's so many high-value ones. Mana Burn, even like Demon Companion can be usable, whereas Twin Slice is most of the time the the absolute best. But yeah, so the Cobalt Spokens cost 3 in his deck. But yeah, you're right. They could be bottom 3, but Cobalt Spoken, you know, the Draken Studies could be pretty big. And now he's got Cabal Acolyte, and he could even like put an Embalming Ritual on the Cabal Acolyte, steal the Wand Maker, push the 5 damage, and have a taunt with Reborn, which is pretty effective.
Yeah, having something sticky on the board against the Demon Hunter is just really crucial overall for what you want to be doing, because it just enables everything else. You know, if you have a minion on the board, Apotheosis becomes really threatening. They can't really get minion damage in. And while Demon Hunter has a lot of damage from hand in the form of weapons and ways to buff their hero attack, it's really not about necessarily just burning them all the time. You do need a little bit of board presence to sometimes close out the deal. And right now, Eddie is so far ahead in tempo. He's got 9 power on the board. NoHandsGamer's on a pretty tight clock, so he actually has to deal with this pretty aggressively. Otherwise, you know, he risks getting overrun. He does have Blade Dance here to help clean things up, but the problem with Blade Dance right now is it doesn't really help develop some of these really expensive cards. And if he wants to get cards like Skull Gul'dan online, he needs to eventually play his Glazebound Adept and his Soul Shard Lapidary in order to get there. That's 3 turns from now.
Yeah, it's quite slow. And Eddie had some interesting decisions last turn. One of them being like whether or not to raise Dead, because he did have 2 minions. He did Brightwing and Vulpire Scoundrel. If he wanted to get those for additional value, he could have raised Dead then, so that way he didn't have like Wand Maker, Cabal Acolyte, in the pool. Decided not to go for it, and then also the choice of reboarding the Frizz over the Cabal Acolyte. Cabal Acolyte is that taunt and has the effect on the backside, but if you're expecting AoE and expecting a Blade Dance, you'd rather have the higher power on board. So that way, No Hands will be forced to take more damage if he wants to attack into it. So that was a very smart play from Eddie. And, oh man, the Mana Feeder Panthera just to get card out of hand and not go for the card draw. Really valuing forward. But now Cabal Acolyte was just going to steal it once again.
I mean, this is just more tempo back on Eddie's side. He finds the Frizz. I mean, at this point, TJ, it really isn't going to be about any Dragon synergy at all. It's the fact that Eddie's playing a 4-mana 5/4 and just getting ahead of NoHandsGamer's board state, because he already had committed to his Blade Dance already. So now, if NoHands wants to, say, activate this Glazebound Adept, he has to take a little bit more damage again, because the Cabal Acolyte stops the attack to face, and No Hands takes 2 more damage. He does end up finding this Adraki Warblade, which is very nice to get back some of that health. But for now, it's still just very slow. And it's not that NoHandsGamer is in a spot where he's guaranteed to lose. By all means, I think Eddie, after these last 2 minions of the Frizz and Mind Flayer, if they're not dealt with, wow, hold on.
Okay. Oh my gosh. When it rains, it pours. This is... The Cabal Shadow Priest picked up. He can go Wave of Apathy, Cabal Shadow Priest. That's a 1-up, by the way. So every minion that No Hands has played, essentially, has been stolen by both the Cabal Acolytes and the Cabal Shadow Priest. And you know, Eddie, with these Frizz and the discounts on the Dragons, we talked about it and how cool it could be. Honestly, it doesn't feel like it's going to matter, because No Hand's just going to die. He's at 13. Even the Eldraki Warblades, without much mana to go along with it, is not going to really do him much good. He might just have to like Soul Shard Lapidary here and like take out the Glazebound to reduce power on board, since you can kill it by taking 1 now instead of doing it with something else. That also opens up the possibility for Skull next turn. Though if he did that, okay, he's just going to go for the Glazebound. There was merit to the isolating the Skull or outcasting the Skull on the far left did have merit, but I think he needs to go Eldraki Warblades plus Soul Shard Lapidary next turn to heal back a lot of this damage that he's going to take.
Yeah, I'm looking at if there was any possibility of some kind of lethal through a Renew, but like Eddie's just going to prioritize going for that Raise Dead Train, that Wand Maker, and finding 2 of them.
Oh my gosh. His Cobalt Spokens now cost 1.
I mean, he doesn't need Cobalt Spelkin at the current pace that Priest is playing. And No Hands finds a lot of damage. He has the Adraki Warblade and the Soldier Lapidary. But right now he's staring at 14 damage on board. And Adraki Warblade and Soldier Lapidary heals you for 7. So that looks like 14 damage to me. And 14 life that NoHandsGamer can have. This is really awkward spot. I don't think Skull Dan can do anything from here either.
No. Maybe if he had played Soul Shard Lapidary last turn and then could have Skulled this turn. The problem is he only had 1 Soul Fragment in the deck, so his out would have been to find something like Spirit Jailer into double Shard Shatter Mystic from Skull, which is a very fringe out. Maybe like a Consume Magic in there to get rid of the Mind Flayer. I don't think No Hands thought he was in that desperate of a situation, but honestly, maybe you have to be. I just don't think there's a way for him to survive here, even if he canes into the... Yeah.
Sure. Nothing. Maybe banking on the fact that Eddie might mess up, but I mean, No Hands knows that there's lethal on board. And Apotheosis is just for extra icing on the cake. That's going to do it for game number 1. Priest out-tempos the Demon Hunter. And maybe goes to show you why a lot of these Priest decks are gravitating away from the Galakron Priest package, because they felt like it's more important to have this early game control tools to maybe even out-tempo your opponent. You know, a lot of times these things like the mind control abilities of Cabal Acolyte and Cabal Shadow Priest are seen more as a defensive thing because you're trying to stop their opponent's momentum. But if you're ahead on board, as the way Eddie's fought so vigilantly for, you're able to even just push damage consistently. And it's not like Priest had a real burn in hand, right? The reason why we're like, well, Eddie could get stopped if No Hands gets on board is because his hand was reactive with like Holy Smite and Renew and like, you know, all these other different things. But No Hands never got ahead on board, ever. So that was a really good demonstration of what Priest can do when it's in the driver's seat. And then also another big thing to point out was what we said in the very beginning. Demon Hunter is still on the table, which gives Paladin another chance here.
Yes, it does. And honestly, you know, judging by the way this is going, this might have to be No Hands cornering like Pain Warrior. He's got to get good matchups. He's got to like get his Demon Hunter through against Warrior, and then get his Rogue through against Paladin, because the Paladin matchup against Demon Hunter is pretty poor. And then the Rogue matchup against Warrior is pretty poor. Even the opposites are pretty poor. They're just not as poor as the alternative. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. So Eddie is going to queue up the Pain Warrior now. He even has a Kobold Sticky Finger in the Pain Warrior. So really getting the hard read on No Hands, playing a lot of weapon classes over the past couple weeks, saying, you know, I'm not going to let you stick anything. But not going to be useful in this matchup. No Hands is going to turn to the Malagos Druid. Pretty standard. He does have double Teacher's Pet, double Twilight Runner as his beast, and no Lake Thresher, which may cause him to fall behind on tempo at some points. But I do generally like the Druid matchups against Pain Warrior, both of them, just because the big minions that you can put out, the Pain Warrior doesn't have hard removal outside of Lord Barav. So if you can, you know, safely get to those later stages of the game, I feel like this should be in Druid favor. Maybe not as much as Survival Druid, but the Pain Warrior players that we did see last week were banning Druid. So this is probably one of the better matchups that he could have hoped for.
Yeah, so maybe it ends up going that way, but we shall see. Risky Skipper early, very early, but nothing for Eddie to actually play immediately with it. Chooses not the hero power, of course, because of the idea that you really want to damage yourself too. The possibility of Battle Rage. NoHandsGamer finding a Wild Growth. All right.
Okay. He's like, oh geez. No Wild Growth in the deck. Just he's just running the double Breath of Dreams, but Risky Skipper doesn't have too much use in the Druid matchup because, you know, if you're dealing like 3, even 4 damage, which is like the maximum, and that's only if you can, you know, buff up your Risky Skipper in some way or another. Doesn't really touch many of the things that Druid will do. Oh wow, Overgrowth picked up. The problem with Overgrowth this turn, I feel, is it's not the best feeling to leave a damaged Warmaw Challenger on the board this early on into the game, just because of the fact that there's so many ways that Eddie can buff it and then copy it with a Bloodsworn Mercenary. So yeah, he is going to deviate here and try and play for Temple a little bit and play out this Teacher's Pet.
I mean, Warmaw Challenger is really scary, but it's a very specific set of cards that can punish. One of them tends to be in Eddie's hand, but yeah, still needs a little bit more here. What's the best course of action to get the best value off of this Blood Boil Brute, which you can play this turn? Looks a little tricky to me. One way you could possibly do it is actually to Shield of Honor the Risky Skipper. Bump both of those minions, then play the Blood, or bump one of those minions, play Blood Boil Brute for 4. Oh no, you can't, because Shield of Honor costs you that mana, so you don't actually get that discount. So this does look a little bit awkward for Eddie, no matter how creatively I'm trying to think about the situation here.
Yeah, he could have gone like just bump the Teacher's Pet and then play the Blood Boil Brute, but it's kind of unnecessarily damaging the Warmaw Challenger, and you will not kill the beast on the other side and still take a lot of damage on the Blood Boil Brute. So this is probably the most efficient use.
Yeah, he's kind of hoping for a weaker minion, but this Porcupine ends up doing a lot on the board. Oh, 2 damage to the face, though.
That's terrible, because Battle Rage, it was likely that NoHandsGamer was never going to attack face until he needed to, or was pushing a significant amount of damage. So now that's just an extra card that will be drawn from Battle Rage. So not pretty poor, very poor outcome for NoHands with both those shots going to the face. Now we'll have to Wild Growth, but just no follow-up. He's got Fungal Fortunes, but he does have a lot of minions in the deck. You have the 3 big dragons, Geppetto, Forest Warden Omu, all the beasts. A lot of minions that you really don't want to discard, but honestly, with this type of hand, you can't afford not to just try and draw as much as possible, especially since there's a lot of pressure on board already from Eddie. 1 minion.
Oh no.
Okay, well, I mean, only 1 minion discarded, but
it was a good minion.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the ideal minions to play, especially just right here in this spot, because you could take the punishment for 1 turn. The issue is, what do you do 2 turns from that? And right now, it seems like NoHandsGamer is prioritizing removing everything he possibly can. This is a really lackluster hand. Has to commit to stabilizing his health total somehow. Ends up using both his Innervate and his Lightning Bloom. A whole lot of nothing. And Eddie just plays Tempo Minion. Blood Boil Brute as a 6-mana minion with no other effect. It's okay. Oh, jeez. Just nothing here for NoHands. Oh, okay. But if it was drawn the other way, where Crystal Power was the card instead of the Guardian Animals, it would have been Guardian Animals here on this turn.
Yeah. But
Very
I'll
annoying.
take this, honestly.
Okay.
Okay, so he's going for double healing here. I was thinking of holding on to 1, just because the way the Guardian Animals will line up next turn. You can Iron Bark, Twilight Runner, and then be at 6 damage, and then kill the Blood Boil Brute with the 2nd Crystal Power, because he'd have the mana to be able to do that. But maybe he thinks that he needs to use all the mana he can get next turn for the cards that he's going to draw from Twilight Runner, and maybe needs that extra mana crystal, but does just bank on the healing, because most of the time in this matchup, that's where those are. Picks up Bloodsworn Mercenary off the top. Oh my goodness. This is a lot of pressure, and NoHands has used a lot of his removal. He's going to have to win this with straight up minions, and Guardian Animals will help, but if he draws a beast off the top, he only has 1 beast left in his deck. Okay, that's a good follow-up.
Yeah, but he doesn't have any Lake Threshers in his deck. So how do you actually deal with such a wide board? Lake Thresher is designed for this kind of situations to be a huge part of that Guardian Animals package. And, you know, I was kind of thinking about Eddie, if he wanted to be a little greedier, he could have used Bloodsworn Mercenary on, say, the Blood Boil Brute. And maybe... But he would have to, like, play Armorsmith first, or he would have to play, like, Risky Skipper and damage his minions, which I think he didn't want to do. He wanted to keep them healthy as possible. Either way, if this Risky Skipper survives, we have Grommash Hellscream ready to go for the following turn to immediately attack for 10. No Hands would have to try to survive off of that. Right now, No Hands understands that Risky Skipper is a big threat. Eddie wouldn't just play that card lightly onto the board. Can't kill anything else either, besides the Bloodsworn Mercenary, which is a way lower threat priority.
Yeah. This is a really smart trades from No Hands, because you don't want to sink 2 minions into 1 minion on the warrior side because of the possibility of battle rage, and you want to take out the Risky Skipper again because of the possibility of battle rage. I think Grommash is kind of an icing on top in that case, where you get to shut that off. But No Hands trying to limit the amount of card draw. Ironbark here is just excessive. He already has enough damage blocking on board, and he, like, next turn he wants the ability to play Malygos plus Ironbark, which honestly, Malygos, Ironbark, and then Moonfire the Grom seems like a decent play next turn.
I mean, no ability to attack into it. Malygos finds Overgrowth, which is not really enough here, and the Moonfire from Malygos to shut down the Grom will leave still a lot of power on the board, so perhaps the Ironbark needs to be played as well. It's desperation time for No Hands. The nice thing is, if he can get to the point of stabilization, he has an overflow, so he will out-resource the Warrior. But if Eddie finds another way to get past his Malygos, it is game over.
Oh, he has
Battle Rage.
Oh, he even has Rampage, which is enough damage. Not quite enough damage on board. It's 14 damage.
Close.
It's close, yeah. Very likely to find it here. Korkarn Elite would be enough.
Oh,
Wait, Lord Barov, that.
Oh, and he has a Terran Gorfiend.
It's close to lethal.
It's extremely close to lethal.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Okay. If we rampage, then we probably don't want to play Lord Barov, right? Because that would be a very difficult dynamic to try and resolve. Because you end up making all your minions into 1 health, which means that cards like Moonfire on the top would be very effective. And now No Hands draws his Ystera Leech, so it's just a little bit too slow. Shake at the head. Playing Overflow, trying to see if he can draw anything to help bail him out, but there's only a few options remaining.
Yeah, I don't even know what he would even draw that would save him in this situation. I can't even think of a single card.
Oof.
Because he's used Ironbark, he has no animals left. Forest Warden Omu would be the only way he could reset his mana crystals, but he wouldn't even have enough mana to get there because he only has 1 Innervate, 1 Lightning Boom left in the deck. I just don't think there was any way for him to save himself there. And yeah, Eddie gets through. I mean, you could see that Druid was close to stabilization if that Malygos sticks onto the board, but Eddie just had such a fast start. I love the Risky Skipper play on 1, not a play that a lot of players will make, and it kind of unlocked his ability to deal with the Teacher's Pet because his minion was already damaged because of the Risky Skipper. So very smart play, and was rewarded in the end with a win.
Yeah, that's right. And so well done by Eddie. And now, targeting the Demon Hunter seems like a really powerful strategy, because that's a matchup that also Demon Hunter doesn't really want to face up against. And now Eddie has the ability to do that with the Paladin. The Paladin's coming up next no matter what for Eddie. Interesting to note, too, it felt like NoHandsGamer was doing something similar last week when he was playing a strategy that was largely a strategy that he liked to play in the previous expansions, when we'd call it like No Hands Warrior. And it feels a little bit ironic here that Eddie's using decks like that to beat NoHandsGamer. Decks like Tempo Priest, and decks like the Enrage, you know, Pain Warrior. It's a very interesting dynamic that's happening here today.
Yeah, and Paymore is a very tough deck to play. One mistake can, lose you games if you're not managing your resources correctly. It's a little bit a different playstyle of the deck than it was when it was No Hands Warrior, which was more centered around tempo, where now it's more centered around like just being annoying, and putting a lot of little stuff on the board. Maybe not Eddie's version as much, since he only runs one live wire lance, one Corsair cache, and the Serpent Ink package, but you can tell what his strategy is. Like you mentioned, the corner the Demon Hunter.
To me now.
I mean, sometimes you just gotta get tempo, right? And so playing minions onto the board here with the first day of school, it's really just important to get that established one drop, especially when you have Hand of a Doll. And yeah, it'll deal damage right back. But, I don't think Eddie's sweating it too much. If he's able to get a 3/6 on board this early with the Hand of a Doll, that's going to be hard to stop, no matter what class you are, Druid or not.
Yeah. Well, No Hands has a pretty good hand, all things considered. He's got Overgrowth into Guardian Animals with the Sarah Unleashed already in hand. It's just how far ahead can Eddie get before that happens. One thing to keep in mind is this is not the pure Paladin. This isn't the super board-centric version of the deck. It's a little more utility-focused, a little better against aggro. You're not playing like Goody Two Shields or I can't. For some reason, I'm blanking on the name. The 2-mana match the highest attack and health on board. You're not able
Argent
to take
Braggart.
Yeah, Argent Braggart. There you go. Thank you. And you're not able to take a board and just completely snowball it out of control. But what it does do is protect its board very well. And that's kind of what I like about it.
All right, well, Eddie will have a couple of the minions stopped early, which is fine, and I think that for Eddie's sake, he's just thinking about what's best to build the board over time. But that Hand of the Adult is pretty nasty and can use the Abusive Sergeant right after as well, adding a little bit extra damage. Salad's Pride is very nice to actually play in this deck. Similar to what Salad's Pride likes to do in Eddie's Shirvala deck from the previous Grandmaster season, back when Paladin was played as a combo-oriented deck. Salad's Pride is really important to keep the card draw going and keep the resources going, especially if you don't have Lady Liadrin. In this case, Eddie has both card draw and the Liadrin top end. It's going to be pretty nasty stuff.
Yeah. I like the prioritization on the Salad's Pride here too. Knowing that there's no Lake Thresher, doesn't have to really worry about too much. And, getting the cards out of your deck to be able to increase the average quality of your draw is quite important here. Twilight Runner Teacher's Pet. So I can Twilight Runner into the Ash Tongue and Moonfire it if he wants. This matchup, you do kind of need all the damage you can get at certain points, but you also can't fall too far behind on board. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if No Hands, because he's not falling that far behind, does just hold on to the Moonfire here, just because a lot of times with double Libram of Hope and the Lightforge Blessing in Eddie's deck, you may not be able to find those damage openings with Malgus later on in the game. And because you can't fully rely on dragons and big minions with the Ysera Unleashed to finish out the game later on, but it looks like he's going to go for that. This Libram Paladin deck specifically has a lot of board-wide removal. It's got the double Libram of Justice with Wild Pyromancers. It's got Lord Barav, as well as just animated broomsticks with big minions.
And of course, Lady Liadrin ends up becoming such a big reload that even if you dump your entire hand for removal, you still have a lot of resources left.
Yep, very true.
And there's also even really interesting opportunities to combo that if you use the High Abyss Allura, which sometimes ends up just being the nuts when instead of just buffing your own minions. Sometimes it just plays Libra of Justice and out tempos a druid. Like I was playing some ladder games watching Europe, and I was like in a situation where druid played like Innervate, Lightning Bloom, Guardian Animals, and I'm like, all right, well, Lura and play a spell, and then she played Libra of Justice, and I just destroyed their board. So there's some really interesting dynamics in this Paladin deck that you don't necessarily immediately think about, but ends up being very powerful. Oh my gosh, speaking of powerful, full clear on the Guardian Animals. Desert Hare not going to really do much against most decks here, so NoHandsGamer has to go back to the drawing board if he wants to push out this Ysera this turn.
Yeah, and I think you do it. He can Lightning Bloom, Ysera Unleashed, and then also play Nature Studies. Ooh.
Okay, so Iron Bar could be used this turn if he wants to play it on the Ysera just to protect your life total. There is this point where Paladin acknowledges that they can't really beat the Druid late game, especially if they have like big combo damage with Malyghost. So they sometimes would start ignoring your board and start pushing damage, but Iron Bark makes that impossible to do so. Unless they, of course, have Libra of Justice, which Eddie has 2 of right now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's 2 arguments to this. It's if you don't Iron Bark now, you're not going to force out the Libra of Justice, because Eddie could just ignore it. So I like the use of it, especially since he has a natural one in his deck. But now does need a little bit of help.
Wow.
He needs some portals from his deck, because he's starting to be under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, he needs to draw a Dream Portal for sure if he wants to start fighting back. Doesn't find any of it. But I was going to say that this is the position that I think is what first make Libra Paladin be put on the map for the Skullomance Academy. When Druid was using Guardian Animals and absolutely wreaking havoc on day 1 of the expansion, Paladins were rising up to pressure Druid with a Libram strategy, which kept them in check. And then the way to beat both Paladin and the Druid, there was some other class that were rising up, Priest being one of them as well. And so Libram Paladin was quite a force on ladder, primarily because of the way they would interact with the Druid. And now you can see a little bit of that coming into play here. Eddie with a Lady Liadrin just for a Hand of Adult and Tempo on his side. He's got McGurgle Prime as well. And NoHandsGamer has to find a way to stabilize this turn. He cannot afford to leave up more than 1 minion here.
Ooh. Alright, so there are only 4 minions left in the deck. Twilight Runner, Omu, Alexstrasza, and Malygos. This might be a Geppetto play.
Okay.
To try and get a huge swing onto the board.
Right, so then what's the sequence? What do you play first? You play Crystal Power to dump, and then you play
Crystal Power
Geppetto?
to dump, and then Geppetto, and then if you hit Omu Malygos, you're cooking. If you hit, you kind of need to hit Omu. If you hit Omu Alexstrasza, that's okay, because you can still utilize, well...
Time waits for no one.
Yeah, you can still utilize the extra mana crystals to try and clear off some of the board. If you hit Twilight Runner, you don't want Twilight Runner. Just don't even think about Twilight Runner. Now he's out of time, though, so...
I mean, he has to do something. And so NoHands is just going for full-on, completely defensive stance. Burn everything. But the problem is, this is exactly what Eddie was anticipating, which was, if he clears my board, I have more reload. So he's prioritizing the pressure, and this is even harder board to remove now with swipes being gone from the deck. NoHands has to go for this Geppetto and find a miracle situation. And he needs to find opportunities to maybe even draw those Dream Portals for a big game-changing impact. Alexstrasza is nice.
I'm not going to lie, Dan. I feel like the only way NoHandsGamer was winning this game is if he went for the Geppetto last turn.
It is not looking promising for our current Division A leader. Eddie wants to claim that #1 spot in tie no hands with a 3-2 record. I guess Eddie was a little fed up with having a 50% match score. 3 portals being drawn.
Time waits for no one.
We know that almost all of this is meaningless because Eddie still has the Librum of Justice.
I concede.
But that's not even going to stop what's currently on board. 3-0 for Eddie to start things off. Week 6, day number 1. As Eddie will tie our division leader in Division A, which, as much as we'd love to see No Hands continue to succeed, it feels fitting that Eddie is able to, climb up again in that standings. It'd be definitely a very sad thing to see Eddie do be so dominant the first 3 weeks and then have a very underwhelming score to maybe even land him in the relegation bracket.
Yeah, it would have been rough, but Eddie, I feel that this is a lineup victory more than anything, and Eddie was afforded that luxury because he did have just the one match this week, which was against No Hands, so he was able to kind of tailor make a strategy towards him and worked out really well.